Hello, I'm James Barth from Rock Hard 4x4, and today I'm here to tell you about our Ford Bronco skid plate system. Now, we've been in the Jeep industry for around 31 years building components, so this is something that's not new to us as far as manufacturing parts here in the United States for the aftermarket for vehicles. The skid plate system we offer for the Ford Bronco has a couple different options we want to talk to you about. This particular one being the style of bash plate here in the front. This particular one here works with our Rock Hard 4x4 bumper, along with the factory steel bumper and some of the different aftermarket front bumpers. As long as the factory skid plate that worked with the factory bumper works with your bumper, it should work with ours. Now, this skid plate system, this bash plate is available with our aftermarket bumper also. Now, we also offer one for the plastic style front bumper that we'll show you here in just a minute. As this skid plate system goes on, at the bolt areas we put these dome rock protectors. These are something we manufacture in-house. They protect the head of the bolt. You'll notice here that we have an opening to drain your oil. The filter is located in other areas on the Bronco, so it's really not a problem here. But this makes it access so you can get to drain your oil also. Now, it does clear all your independent front suspension. It is made of 3/16 steel or 1/4-inch aluminum. We offer both. Both of them do adequate amount of protection depending on what you're trying to do. If you have any questions as far as to go steel or aluminum, please pick up the phone and give us a call. We'll answer all your questions. This is composed of mainly of four main pieces: the front bash plate, the front belly pan skid, what we call our transfer case skid here, and our fuel tank skid. Now, on the fuel tank skid, there's a couple brackets that hold it from the frame going on down to the actual skid plate itself, and one on the transfer case. Now, those will be shown to you in the installation video also. But here at Rock Hard 4x4, we've manufactured this plate system to give you adequate protection to be able to drag the bottom end of your vehicle and to protect the motor, the oil pan, the transfer case, the transmission, and your fuel tank. Now, on the factory fuel tank, you'll find that some of them have a factory skid over them, and some of them are just clear plain plastic and no protection. We offer two different fuel tank systems for that. Make sure that if you have a question while ordering, whether it's which you have as the factory skid on the fuel tank or not, or which bash plate to buy here in the front, please give us a call at Rock Hard 4x4. We'll answer all those questions and make your install and your ordering process simple. Now we're going to go ahead and show you how to install these skid plate systems here on this Bronco. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about the installation of the skid plate system that Rock Hard 4x4 manufactures for your Ford Bronco. Now, these are available for the 2- and the 4-door different models and different configurations. So we'll go through some of those different configurations as we do this installation here today. We're going to go ahead and talk about removing if you have any of the factory shields. So we're going to go ahead and remove this shield here, this one here that goes from side to side, along with the one under the oil pan, and the bash shield in the front that goes from the front bumper down. Now, you'll see a little bit further on in the install, we're going to talk about two different styles of front bash plates. And what we call a bash plate is where it comes from the bottom of the front bumper down to the start of your independent front suspension. We offer a couple different styles of that plate depending on what bumper and such you have. We'll show you pictures. Just make sure that when you are ordering that we do get the correct one ordered. There's also another thing. On the fuel tank systems here, if you ordered it as like a Sasquatch package and some of the others that had the option for the factory fuel tank skid, this here skid does stay on because this is the hanger of your fuel tank. We didn't want to remove this because we don't want to change how your fuel tank is hung on the frame. Now, you will be taking a couple of the bolts off on this fuel tank as we've shown, which will allow it to stay in place while you do the install. Now, we also offer a skid plate system that works with the factory fuel tank that does not have the factory steel cover. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the factory shield here in the front by taking out these 4 bolts. We will do that with a 15mm socket. With the front shield out of the way, we'll go ahead and remove this second shield here. Use your 15mm socket to remove those bolts. Now that you'll notice, we've removed the factory shields, one here for the transfer case, the transmission, and the oil pan, and the bash shield. When we get a little closer here, we'll talk about how we're going to do it on the fuel tank skid. We'll be removing this front bolt here, along with the two around the bracketry that you'll see that things line up with. We'll go ahead and leave those in place right now, as we don't want to mess with where the fuel tank is located. So we'll get to that in a minute. Let's go ahead and we're going to bring the oil pan and the transfer case skid in place. We'll show you how those go. Now what I've done here is I brought the skid plate up in place. This happens to be one of the aluminum versions, so it's a little lighter than the steel ones. Makes it possible for a little easier for one person to do an install. I've held it in place and started the bolt here in the center. Now I'm going to go ahead and start the outer two bolts here. Now we're using the 10mm bolts with our tapered washers to go all the way across this cross member here in the front where your independent front suspension mounts. We're going to go ahead now and use a 18mm wrench and remove this factory bolt. Note the difference in thread between this bolt and these bolts here. These are a 10, this is a 12mm bolt. Now we're going to go ahead and put the transfer case skid in place. We're going to mount it to the outside of the frame on each side first. We're going to mount this using the 12mm bolts and the 1/2-inch washers. Now we're going to go ahead and button this up at the cross member. If you notice, there's 3 areas here where the holes are going to go. These two take a 10mm by 70 long, and this one here is a 12mm by 70 long. So we're going to go ahead and put those in place. This bolt here on the driver's side, right beside the drive shaft, we're going to go ahead and remove it, as we're going to attach a bracket to the front of it, which it's not quite long enough, using a 15mm socket. Go ahead and locate the 170mm by 12mm bolt. Go ahead and tighten the rock hard 4x4 supplied bolt using an 18mm socket or wrench. Now go ahead and locate the bracket. This part number is a 60509J. You'll notice it has a tapped nut in the bottom for where it attaches to the plate here, and this one will go on the bolt head up above. Then you're going to go ahead and locate the 12mm nut, bring the bracket in place. Go ahead and start the nut on the top side, leave it loose, and then we're going to go ahead and bring the skid plate up and install the button head Allen here. The bolt here that goes through the bottom of the transfer case and into the bracket is a 3/8" diameter bolt. Now with all hardware loose, we're going to go ahead and install the fuel tank skid. This will require us to remove 2 bolts going up to the top cross member on the inside and one on the outside once the skid plate is in place. Now we're going to go ahead and use an 18mm socket and remove this bolt here. Now we're going to go ahead and get the fuel tank skid, hold it up in place, and reinstall this bolt. This fuel tank skid slips in between the transfer case and the fuel tank on the 2-door. Now you can go ahead and install this bolt back in place. We're going to reuse the factory bolt on this hanger. Now on the 2- and 4-door models that did not get ordered with the factory skid, you'll notice that your fuel tank is right out here in the open, out in the plastic, and you're nothing to cover it. Just like this particular skid that we designed for the one without a factory skid, because it is shaped a little bit differently, as the fuel tank is straighter, where this we had to put some bows and bends in it to match the contour. That will be bolted up here in the front with the 2 bolts here in the factory frame cross member. That skid mounts there, along with the 2 brackets in the back, and also your outer frame and inner frame mounting bolts. Now that we've went ahead and found the 3/8 by 1.5 bolt here, this is an Allen head bolt that'll keep everything smooth on the bottom. We're going to go ahead and install it through the transfer case and into the fuel tank skid. Install this with the 3/8 nylock nut on the top. Go ahead and leave it loose. We're going to go ahead and now go to the back where we're going to install the 2 hangers. Now we're using an 18mm socket and removing this factory bolt up at the cross member on the rear hanger on the fuel tank. This bracket is a 60509, N as in Nancy. We're going to use the factory hardware to reinstall it at the frame, or you can use the supplied bolt and washer. Now we're going to go ahead and install this bracket using the button head bolt here. We're going to go ahead and remove this bolt here on the rear outer passenger side back of the fuel tank skid. I know that's a little confusing, but it's the one here right by your rear control arm. This is removed with an 18mm socket. You're going to go ahead and install the 60509 or O bracket using the factory hardware or with the Rockhard 4x4 hardware included. This bracket will go on in this form, in this manner, and then you're going to install the Allen head bolt from the bottom here in place. Now we're going to go ahead and we'll tighten everything in place. Now that we've went ahead and installed the fuel tank skid here with the two brackets coming down from the frame, one on the inside, one on the outside, with the hardware at the frame and the Allen bolts here and here, here and here, we're going to go ahead and tighten those with a 7/32 wrench, Allen wrench, and on the top we will be using a in wrench. Now on the outer edges here, and this particular bolt here, we will tighten those down using a 19mm socket. The others will be tightened using a 17. We're going to go ahead and tighten all these in place, and then we'll proceed further forward. Okay, now you'll notice that this slightly hangs down a little bit. Part of it is I think we found a little bit of variances in some of the Broncos in the height here, but it's not a big deal. What we do is we just put a stand underneath of it, bring it up in place. That'll allow you to bring the front skid down over and install the bolts here into the frame. Or if you're doing this on your back in a garage, your floor jack will make it easier also. Just push it up a little bit of pressure here and go ahead and bring the front bash plate in place, and we'll go ahead and install the bolts. These bolts here going across this cross member are a 10 by 150 by 70, and then we use a 10mm that goes into your factory piece here. Now we're going to go ahead and install the front bash plate. This is going to be held on with some 10mm bolts. Go ahead and get it up in place here. Now we're going to go ahead and bring the 4 bolts tight, the 2 here at the cross member and the 2 here at the front using a 17mm socket.